I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. September, the start of the school year across the country, is National Suicide Prevention Month for a reason. Suicide among young people increased dramatically between 2007 and 2018, and thankfully now, the last couple of years, has shown some downtrend. In 2022, Charlie Stevenson, 21 years of age, resident of Alexandria, Virginia, died by suicide while at college in Fort Worth, Texas. Charlie was a young man with plans and loves, and a family that supported him. He had been struggling, that much was sure. But he had always been a quiet child, and it was hard for the family to know the depths of Charlie's struggle as he was going through it. Unable to make sense of the tragedy, Charlie's mother, Betsy Thibault Stevenson, a public affairs writer by trade, wrote a book that was recently published, Blackbird, A Mother's Reflections on Grief, Loss, and Life After Suicide. No parent, I think, is able to find words adequate to their loss when a child dies, but Betsy Stevenson's book for me captured loss and grief structurally, not by words alone. In the book, she goes from a humorous memory of her son to the utter depths of immovable sadness within 2 paragraphs, and these waves come relentlessly. Author Betsy Stevenson joins me for this episode. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by UMBC's Political Science Program, where you'll learn to shape public policy, impact communities, and function at the center of modern society. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
The beat was breaking down just before we met. Sweating in the dark, burning from the sparks it glowed.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning, precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Drew Pictures and the Lead Extras, an indie pop rock band based in Rockville, Maryland. Andrew Glore on vocals and keys, Brian Wolf on guitar, and Josh Wilson on drums. The songs come from their album Cats on Santorini. You can find their music at drewpicturesmusic.com.
Tangled up in red, tango in the dread limbo. When you spin me in the web, I'll have no regret. Who's the real prey? You just let me sway below. Whip me up like butter, I'm a firebrand. Hold me to the fire and leave me dead. Wishy, wishy woman, who you gonna summon? And how do you know for sure? I don't wanna be alone.
Betsy Stevenson, welcome to I Hate Politics.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your son, Charlie, died by suicide 3 years ago, July 2022. You have recently published a book, Blackbird, A Mother's Reflection on Grief, Loss, and Life After Suicide. What is your central message to those of us who are outside of that kind of grief, who have not experienced that kind of grief, to the rest of society about suicide, your son Charlie, yourself?
I think I have learned in the last 3 years that even though I had experienced depression myself and anxiety myself, I did not appreciate or fully understand how powerful depression can be, how strong it can be. And as a parent, I didn't really grasp how sneaky it could be. My son, who was otherwise healthy, connected, social, bright, plenty of dreams and the ability to reach them, that he could become so sick with depression and anxiety that he would take his life. That is my big lesson. And I think I would say to parents and people in the school community, understand that, know it. You know, it is serious.
What would you say to people like us outside about how to talk to you?
Talk to me.
Yes, maybe not 3 years later is different, but in a moment when a person's going through this, how do we talk to that person?
There is nothing to say when you have lost a child. There's nothing to say. It rips your insides out. And what helped me was the people in my life who could be present with me without asking anything of me, without expecting anything of me, but communicating through their words and their actions that they were with me wherever I was. And that doesn't, I said physical presence, that doesn't mean you have to be sitting side by side. Texts, for all the criticism we have about today's modern forms of communication, just thinking of you, saw this and thought you'd like it. That is a connection. And if you're able to be physically present and ready to support someone, that's extremely helpful. I was blessed to have friends and family who have been with me from day one.
You do call your community Charlie's Angels, right?
Yeah, they're incredible. They stepped up and stepped in, everything from helping us run our household while we were in the throes of loss, to I have friends who would come up from wherever they lived across the country and just sit with me for the weekend. I had a friend who said, let's get in my car and just drive around. We just drove up and down the GW Parkway. We didn't do anything. And all those little things add up.
Your grief on losing Charlie was interrupted and maybe invaded by the loss of your mother-in-law and your dog Bear. Did the piling up of tragedies become a mountain, or was the grief at Charlie's death so monumental that nothing else mattered?
It was a mountain because I will tell you, we lost my son, my mother-in-law, and our dog in a 6-week period. So what happens is it seems like everything dies. Everything around you is doomed. And that exerts its own type of pressure on your healing. It really was a blow to my confidence, as a person. Like, what is the point? Everything was death at that time in my life. But you are correct. Charlie losing our son was overwhelming. That was the the primary focus, which then makes you feel guilty, right?
Yeah.
But my mother-in-law, who lived a long and beautiful life, died of dementia, had been ill for quite some time, but she deserved to be celebrated and cherished. And then our dog, our dog is holding us together. And she literally collapsed outside of Charlie's bedroom door. And just not even having that touch point of that presence in the house while we were grieving and trying to find our footing. And then the dog is gone. It's like, cut me a break. So yeah, it was quite a mountain.
You connected suicide and depression. There's a lot of literature on this. In Charlie's case, why did you come to that conclusion that it was depression that caused him to take his own life?
Because we have an innate instinct to live and to survive. It is job number one of being a human, right? It is literally in every cell of our body, every part of our learned experience is to survive. And so this idea that a person could take their own life, that goes against everything in our body, right? And so for me to think about why my son did this, depression has the power to turn your brain on your body, to turn your brain on itself, to override the instinct to survive. And I believe it's one of the few things. I'm not a clinician. I don't study this. But if you really think about that fundamental nature of survival, what does it take? There are not many things that would tangle your brain to the point where you say, the solution to my problems is to die. And so even though Charlie did show signs of depression, we knew he was having suicidal thoughts, but he was so high functioning. He was going to work. He made great grades. He was socializing. He lived with people and he was around them all the time. He had a job. He had a future, meaning he lined up his classes. He's lined up his job. He was making plans. He had vacations scheduled. He had golf matches scheduled. He was very much performing like a healthy person, but he wasn't eating. We don't think he was sleeping very well. And he was fighting really, really hard. And the depression just got him.
So did you arrive at depression as a cause by elimination? So you can see the eating, right? If he's not eating, you can see it. If he's not sleeping, maybe you can see it because, obviously if he's up and you're out. But if he's fighting in other ways and if he's actually functioning very well, you can't see it. I'm just wondering, is this process purely an elimination process? There are several mental health conditions that may be in play. The thing that parents and grandparents and families need to be hyper aware of is, what are we seeing and how do we see it?
It is terrifying to think that this can be right under our nose and we're not fully grasping what's going on. The number one predictor of suicide is previous attempts.
Did Charlie have previous attempts?
I don't know if he attempted, but he had, a moment, an episode where he was so fearful that he was going to attempt that he let someone know and that he called a crisis line.
How long ago was that?
That was 11 weeks before he died. His friend called us and told us, hey, thought you should know. Charlie's talking about harming himself. We were shocked. We had no idea. We were in the dark.
Is that the first time you realized?
That's the first time.
So 11 weeks before he died is the first time you realized?
Correct. Before that, I would not have suspected anything. And when we heard that, we were on it 100%. I flew overnight to Texas, where he was in college, met him, stayed in a hotel room across the street from where he lived. He stayed with me in that room for a week. At his insistence, he went to class. He would go to his group house where he lived to change clothes and shower and see the guys. But every other moment he spent in that hotel room with me. And while I was with him that week, he admitted that he was scared. He couldn't articulate or wouldn't articulate what he was afraid of. That's when I learned he'd called a crisis line. I also learned that he had put himself in therapy about 9 months before. I did not know that he had put himself in therapy. He used his campus resources, right? So getting that, all the things that you see in schools, mental health, make an appointment, call this line, here's a resource. It worked for him up until a point. From that week that I spent with him, we had a lot of conversations. I had talked to him before, but I continued the conversation about my own mental health struggles. By comparison, not much compared to his, but I had depression and I held myself up. I'm like, look, this happens to me from time to time. I see a therapist and then, I'm fine. I've taken medications and then I'm okay. So I was trying to show him this won't last. You can address it. You can have this big, beautiful life like I have. And he was all in. He continued his therapy. We saw him several times. He lived in Texas. We were in Virginia. He flew home a few times, end of school. He came in town for my birthday and for an event at his high school. We saw him at his sister's graduation in Louisiana. And he was working at it. We had open conversations. How are you feeling? What's your outlook? How's your mood? How's therapy? Is there anything on your mind? Anything worrying you? All good. All good. I could tell he wasn't eating because he had lost a lot of weight. But I know that like for me, not being able to eat is a stress response. So, we just say, hey, look, you got to get a smoothie in you, or, nibble on crackers all day or something. And he really tried. And we thought he was okay. A couple of weeks before he died, he was home for about 5 days, and we spent a lot of time together, and he spent a lot of time with his closest friends, and he went out, and he was feeling good. And when my husband and I dropped him off at the airport to fly back to Texas so he could go to his job, we gave him a hug goodbye, and my husband and I got in the car, and my husband said, I think he's going to be okay. And 3 weeks later, he was dead.
So, despite all the communication, despite physical presence, you in Texas and he back in Alexandria, he didn't really open up and tell you what was going on, what his fears were.
He did not open up. I will always wonder, as a professional communicator, that's my job. How come I could not get him to talk or be more forthcoming or provide a complete picture of what was going on with him? And where I have landed is that you can only work with the information you're given. It is heartbreaking and infuriating that Charlie didn't give us more information. And some of us have a personality where we don't want to bother other people anyway. And that was Charlie. He really wanted to be helpful. He didn't want to cause problems. And so I think he really thought he had this under control. He was doing the things you're supposed to do. And he didn't want to bother us. And depression reinforced that by saying in his mind, there's no point in bothering them. It wouldn't do any good anyway.
We do bring up our kids to be self-sufficient.
Yes.
And my parents brought me up to be self-sufficient. So we are raising our kids, and we have been raised ourselves to be exactly the things we should not be.
It's very clear to me that we've missed a step. That you can be self-sufficient, and you can, I think, like for Charlie and for me, I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be someone's problem. Like it turns me cold on the inside to think that someone has a problem in their life because of something I did or didn't do. Right? Like I am revolted by that. The thing is, though, there's a big difference between being someone else's problem and actually functioning completely on your own. Right? You can be self-sufficient and independent, but still accept help, ask for help, expect help. That's part of my thing. I don't expect any help.
So this is perhaps the only political question I'll have. The way we ask help in modern democratic societies is we ask the government for help, or the government arranges. And certainly in the case of mental health, we are very inadequate in terms of resources, even in terms of coverage, insurance coverage. and I would say treatment. And while we have fought stigma successfully in the last maybe 15 years or so, it still remains. If I were to ask you to speculate on that larger question based on your very particular personal experience, how would you?
I think that as a society, we must remove any barrier to help. I think for mental health and well being, this can be very granular. This is something the government doesn't have to do. This is something that families can do, schools can do, churches, community organizations, sports teams. There are a lot of nonprofits. And what to removing barriers means, I'll give an example of my son's alma mater. They have a new building that's dedicated to health and wellness. It's a boarding school, so everyone lives on campus. So they have really extensive, they've got to take care of everything, physical, emotional, with the students. And they intentionally put non-health related offices and rooms in that building so that, everyone knows that building is where the school counselors are, right? The mental health counselors, right? So what 16-year-old wants to be seen going in and out of that building? Stigma we've made a lot of progress, but when you're a teenager and you're struggling, you do not want everyone to necessarily know. But if you're going in and out of that building, people are going to see, oh, yeah, Wednesdays at 3:00. We know where she's going. But by putting non-health related offices and rooms in that building, you could be going in for any reason. You could be going in to talk to your coach. You could be going in for, a study hall session. You could be going in for a club.
So you can hide. Did you, after the fact, ask the school whether Charlie had visited the counselor's office? For that kind of record?
So he didn't when he was in high school. And when he was in college, which is when he got sick, basically his junior year of college, and he was using resources on his campus, we made the decision to not ask for his records because it wasn't going to change anything.
Sure.
And, I don't, it could have been, there are ways to do it, but we just did not want to spend the emotional energy on it.
There is a relationship between depression and substance use. In your book, you write in different places about beer and alcohol and Charlie's behavior in bars, holding purses for the girls that he was with. And also you write about how you found jewel cartridges from the high school days. Was there in your mind ever an issue with addictive behavior early on?
As a parent, of course, I've got 3 kids. As my children grew into high school and college, and, we were aware of their behaviors and sort of, kind of classic teenagers, beers and cigarettes and other things. I realize as a parent, we only know a fraction of what our children are doing. That's probably a good thing. But we did know that all of our children were. I mean, we all lived together during the pandemic. During the pandemic was when the Virginia law about smoking marijuana and making it legal went into effect. So my 3 college student children had a blast on my back porch, honestly. So how could you not, as a parent, go, what's going on here? I do have addiction in my family. Very deep, long, straight line. I've never had any addictive tendencies, and I barely drink and I don't smoke, and but I'm familiar with it and how it affects people. And so I do wonder what role alcohol or smoking may have had on Charlie, but I don't think there was any indication that he was using those substances to cope or cover up, or and that they were not altering his behavior in any way. We won't know. I mean, was it good that he was smoking Juuls in high school? No. I see the articles. I know that can be do some damage, but there's a limit to the forensics that I can do at this point.
Tell me what Charlie was studying.
Charlie was studying political science, and he wanted to be a lawyer. His father's a lawyer. My father was a lawyer. All the men in my family are lawyers, except the engineer out there. And he had that mind, great, very analytical, very logic-oriented, very clever, excellent writer. When he was in high school, he had an internship with an administrative judge in Washington, D.C., and he loved it. He was a senior in high school, and he was researching. He would it was casework, There'd be a complaint. He would go and he would research the law, the rules. He would write up how it fit with the complaint.
Why did you choose Texas Christian University for the distance?
So we have a lot of family in Texas, and my husband's from Texas. My mom and aunt are in Texas, and in fact, my children went to summer camp on the Guadalupe River that just had those floods. So we spent a lot of time in the hill country when he was growing up, and we were just spent better parts of the summer there. So he had a strong orientation to Texas, and his 2 older sisters went to TCU.
Oh.
So, yeah.
So his family connection.
Family connection, yeah. I wanted him to go. He got into Wake Forest. I wanted him to go to Wake Forest, but he said he wanted to be a cowboy for a couple of years. So,
you said you had become a student of grief.
Mm-hmm.
And that you consumed copious books and articles and everything else. Are there some standout suggestions you have to share?
For me, the big thing with grief, probably the number one thing, is instead of asking myself, do I want to do something? I ask myself, can I do something? So if someone says, you want to go for a walk? want is not in the equation. It's can I? Because I don't want to do anything. Even 3 years later, I don't want to do anything. But I can. I can sit here and talk to you. I can take my dog around the block. I can pick up the phone and call a friend. I can answer the phone when a friend calls. I can cook. I don't want to cook, but I can. And that mindset opened up so many things that have led to healing.
Families are often destroyed by this kind of tragedy. What specific things did you do to keep your family together? Marriage and family. I mean, I would say.
Yes. No, you're right. I mean, this is very hard for families, and we are forever changed by it. We were honest and forthcoming about cause of death. We realized together as a family, the four of us, that we didn't want to carry the burden of secrecy because that was not going to help us at a time when everything was falling apart. So that was a very important decision we made as a family. We didn't have to pretend. We didn't need to hide. We didn't need to worry about who knew what. We included the fact that Charlie was depressed in his death notice. So that was the first thing. And then the other big thing that helped us as a family was we respected that each of us have our own grief journey. They look different. One of my daughters had to be busy and social. She needed to be out there with other people. So she was trying to inject some normalcy and some happy experiences to counter her grief. My other daughter went inward. She needed to be by herself. She needed to sit with it and process it and journal and meditate and really embrace this loss. And my husband was kind of in between. He got up, he went to work, he tried to have things that felt normal to him. He was continuing to provide and engage in this grown-up world in Washington, D.C. And then he would come home and he would fall apart. And I just sat in a chair for about a year.
Do you watch Washington Commanders games now that Dan Snyder is not there anymore to find a connection to Charlie?
Yes! My son Charlie hated Dan Snyder. And he loved the Washington football team, went to games from the time he was quite young, and in fact, lived in college with a couple of his roommates were Commanders fans as well. So really, really loved the team. And he would be so happy. No, Charlie is so happy that Dan Snyder is out. And we do watch the games. And I'm thrilled because Jaden Daniels, the superstar quarterback, went to my college, LSU. So I just feel like it's all come together in the most beautiful way. And I can't wait for the season to start.
Do you believe in heaven?
I believe in a place. I don't know what I believe, but I take great comfort in the idea that Charlie's out there and that he's with me because he can be. That place certainly feels heavenly to me, but there's no prescribed, for me, path or existence, if that makes sense. I kind of do an all of the above thing.
Betsy Stevenson, I wish you more memories of Charlie. Congratulations on your book. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Golden lovely, keep me running. Everything's perfect when it's new.
That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. Don't forget to tune in to our Tuesday morning news analysis. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from Drew Pictures and the Lead Extras, an indie pop rock band based in Rockville, Maryland. Andrew Glore on vocals and keys, Brian Wolf on guitar, and Josh Wilson on drums. The songs come from their album Cats on Santorini. You can find their music at drewpicturesmusic.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
On the wall.